through a portion of this yesterday, and I'm going to take the rest of you through today. One of the problems that has to be surmounted on any of these activities is you got to learn Discord. We're doing that okay at this point in time, but ultimately you have to be able to use Corel Draw with some degree of comfort. Otherwise, it makes the image paint portion kind of frustrating. So I just wanted to make sure that what we're doing here is generally understood from a kind of an overview of Corel Draw on down to where we're loading and working with the image paint. So I purposely put myself on my get started, or you could be on your workspace. If you're looking at the workspace, probably the most important thing to check is, do you have the word default highlighted in your Corel Draw? We'll look at it at another location. If you're not in the default, then when we go to talk at you about how to do this or that, nothing will line up. It gets really quite confusing. So we're going to make sure people can get to the default and understand that they're getting there. All right. The other thing that we're looking at right now is when we first get started, if you've been using Corel Draw, it remembers a certain number of your settings. It certainly remembers up to however many you tell it images of things that you've reloaded or have been doing in the past. So you should be able to see that screen pretty well here. You also have to be kind of familiar with the menu structures on Corel Draw because they come and go occasionally. In this mode, I only have 4 commands: File, Tools, Window. You can see what's underneath them, Help, obviously, and then the desktop. So the second I go to create a new document, that will change. But while we're here, I wanted to make sure people know, as I'm doing stuff, a right mouse click on the toolbar area should bring down a drop down of all the different choices you have. So for example, menu bar is here at the top. It's got File, Tools, Window. The next line down is the toolbox is this one over here, not highlighted at the moment. Property bar, standard is this batch in here. What happens to you if you're not careful? Different places you click on the menu will bring up stuff. So I'm currently clicking on the standard bar. Nothing pops up. The second I go down here, it pops up. Other places it'll pop up. The reason I want you to be aware of that is a context-based performance. Right click brings up the menu. Left click does the select. You need to be comfortable with that because one of the problems you'll get into is sometimes somewhere you get rid of the menu bar and all of a sudden all of those commands are lost. And if you don't know to right click on other places of the area, you may never see your menu bar again. So I want to make sure that was clear before we get started here. As far as choices, I can create a new document here. I can create a new document here. Or in this case, if I want to load up the rows and it's available to me, I can actually do a file open because SVG is one of the formats that can be read by Corel Draw in the versions that we're working with. But first things first, I'm going to make just go ahead if you have a question. Okay, so when under workspace, it's telling me, oh, by the way, I have a default setup. Default is the menus you are looking at currently. If I were to go down and look at workspace under the window on the menu bar here, you get the same basic statement, is in default mode. There are other modes here, like the touchscreen one. None of the menus or none of the screen settings are the same, and you can spend a good long time poking around trying to figure out how to get back. Ultimately, if you just can't, then you have to do the start Corel Draw by holding down the F8, which forces it back into a default mode. But so the main thing right now is you just want to make sure that if you're being taught something about Corel Draw and you're not in the default mode, we can talk at each other for hours and never understand what the problem was. So we'll go ahead and launch into the file itself right now. The other thing you'll notice on the window here is I already have Image Paint installed, but I do not have it selected, so it won't load when I first go into Corel Draw. And part of that is just as planned for the presentation. I want to make sure you understood where things are. But this time, if you've done your work before the meeting with the free vectors that Vincent provided you, you'll be able to look at the veneers and load them into the library, and we'll do that once we're inside here. But first things first, if you do File Open, the only problem you might have is if you don't know where you downloaded the files from yesterday, you're going to have to go off and look for them. I happen to have downloaded them and created a directory called Roses. And in Roses is an SVG that was updated yesterday, and I'll show you why. And then these are the Burl images. You'll notice in mine, I specifically added to the the details here, the horizontal and vertical resolution. Image Paint behaves much better if your resolution is in the 72 region. If you're looking down here and see 200 or 300, you're going to have to do some downsizing of the images. The program will do that automatically for you and tell you, but you need to be aware of that when you're going into it. You can also, yeah, here, okay, okay. Yeah, that's correct. And again, the situation here is part of the reason for spending a few seconds up here is that if you have this menu bar, you're 90% guaranteed to be in the standard mode. But clicking on the window tab before you load anything, you'll be able to see down, like I said, on the drop down, what workspaces, if any, you have. And if it's defaulted to the standard one, quit while you're ahead. It's the right choice. Okay. Well, oh, you know what you get to do if we get a little bit of extra time is you're going to have to share your screen. So you'll have to figure out how to do that later. But first things first, I Vincent with his Roses 5.3 fixed a problem that I'd spotted. Oh, sure. Okay, you're in Discord. I don't have my Discord page shared, but basically, when you're in Image Paint and you've done the browse channels and selected all the different things, what you get for your effort are the hash mark rules, moderator, announcements, free vector files. So on the Discord screen, you're going to go to the free vector files, which is on the left side of the screen, click on it, and then default right there on that first offering are all of the veneers for this example, and then just down below it, the download for the SVG file that we're going to be looking at. So you can basically download those to your computer and set yourself up. I've got them downloaded here, so I think to make progress. The only thing I found yesterday is when you click on the image, the first time around, I tried just saving it right out of Discord, and I ultimately found that I had to load the image in my browser, which is a button directly below the image. Then it downloaded correctly and didn't have any issues. But you have to play with it a little bit. One of the reasons for checking anything before you go in is it's a lot easier to see if your veneers are okay or not. So, for example, on this one, Olive Burl, I've got a preview mode, and what you were looking for, he's got it stashed with the actual size of the object as part of the image. If you get into whatever program you're using and it's not measuring correctly, then you may have to go do some other steps offline, and I'll explain that later if needed. But the first thing right now is these are the veneer pictures that he's provided for the roses. So I'm going to go ahead and download roses. Um, it'll take a second to load, and while it's loading, I want you to notice that now, where I had four options before on the menu bar, I now have, in the context of a new document, a whole bunch more choices here. So just be aware that as you do things in CorelDRAW, that will change. And this line here specifically depends on the page. So right now we've got a page size specified, oriented, so forth and so on. I got some nudge information right here. That changes the second we go to select something or work with it. But just be advised, this one is the primary, secondary, and then this one is the actual tool stuff. And now the toolbar on mine is open. So remember we were right clicking up in here and getting the command menu. Now it doesn't do it on the standard line, but it will do it over here. And if I click on the toolbar, it'll do it over there. If I click out here in the drawing area, I get a different context. And this is all right clicking, okay? Now the normal setup for my desktop is I have the rulers turned on. You can go do that here under your tools, options, and stuff like that. The other thing I want you to be aware of is at any given time, if I want to change some of this stuff, I can double click, for example, on the ruler, and it will immediately take me into options, document, rulers, where I can set a nudge factor, I can set origin information. So mine's a little bit awkward here. I probably ought to set origins differently, but I won't. The main thing right now is just double clicking on the rulers gives me the access to that information. If I also look across here, I have the nudge here that I could specify and a few other odds and ends. But the point I'm trying to make here is things are stashed with the right click, all else fails. The next step to get the working environment that we need for this example is you need to go to Windows and check on Dockers. Now Dockers, the ones that I recommend you have open as a general rule are properties, objects, and for this example, find and replace. Others that I will use will be align and distribute, step and repeat. Corners I'll use if I'm trying to get away from things that may not cut very well. So again, these are all different Dockers. The first one I select will put a Dockers menu over here on the right side of the display. So here's properties. This is the menu bar, the toolbar for Dockers. If I click on this plus symbol here, it brings up the same list that we had here under Window Dockers, but now I can select other Dockers one at a time. The corners just for the property. And they're all appearing here, and the last one you selected is the one that will be up here. So I'm going to go back to objects this time. And now we're ready to start. But for my default environment, I almost always guarantee that you'll find these Dockers already set up. And if not, I will set them up. When you import a picture from somebody else, if you're lucky, everything's in good layers, and Vincent does pretty good work that way. What's of interest in here is you'll notice that I've got SVG data. These two first items on objects are associated with the SVG format and are not needed for working in CorelDRAW in this environment. Everything is currently locked, meaning you can't do anything anyway. I can't really select or work with any of these pictures or objects until I undo them. So the one way is you can right click on that line and unlock it. You can also just plain go over here and click on the lock with your mouse. That's a left click. You can make it visible. In this case, there's no reason because there's actually nothing you can see. This particular group, I'm going to unlock. So I'm basically unlocking them. If I do a click and then a shift click on the bottom one, I get them all selected equally. But again, that's a CorelDRAW is them. If they're all selected, I can make them go away or not. So you don't really need to do that. I'm just wanting you to understand that there are ways to get to each line item, and there are ways to get to the whole group through different directions. So this one is a right click and the word delete. You don't need it. So I'm doing a right click and deleting. I could also select it and hit the delete key on my keyboard. We'll keep doing this because it's easier to work with. This object, the layer is pointing down like this, things are expanded. So to see what's in that grouping, I need to expand it. So now we have vectors, a reference fill, and a few bits of other things. This group of objects is this bitmap showing you which woods to apply where. So I'm going to go ahead and start doing here. So this one, I've got a group of two objects. To work this particular project in CorelDRAW, I'm going to right click and I'm going to tell it to ungroup. This time, if I do a right click and ungroup, it will give me all of the objects in the picture. So for example, this object here, you see the little black boxes indicates it's selected. If it's a group, you'll see that information stated here. It's not, it's a single object. If you look down here on the status bar in CorelDRAW, it tells you that it's an RGB file. There's a variety of other information that we'll get when you're actually working on it. This toolbar can be adjusted here. You can choose what you do. This is the default. I have no reason to change it. If I look at it carefully, I've got a pick tool, which is how you select objects. I also, if you look at the tiny corner triangle here, if I left click on that, all of a sudden I have a context menu of freehand pick, free transform, or pick. I leave it on pick. The next one down is the shape tool, which is accessible by hitting an F10 if you're somewhere else on the screen. But this one also has different choices, things like that. If the object you selected is not a group, then when I select the shape, I am picking up all of the lines and nodes that are in that line. So you can see that's defined. A lot of it's out in here. But if you also notice, the other brown areas in this picture are not highlighted. If I select on that leaf here, that leaf is highlighted with nodes. So the point I'm trying to make here is that in the shape tool, you can very quickly see the structure for that object. You'll also notice that it's instantly being highlighted over here in the object. So I can click on the object here and have it highlight over in the picture. The that's one choice. If I go back to the pick tool, it remains highlighted. So the rules basically follow if you're looking at the objects Docker or at the actual image itself. So we're back in this mode, and we'll do the first exercise for creating this drawing. And we'll do it before I load the image paint. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Um, the answer was much the same that we just went through. I went in blind the first time and proceeded to try selecting the first item. I couldn't because it was locked. Then I unlocked it and made it visible. And it turned out to be a little teeny dot in the middle of something somewhere, which was a reference material. So that was one of the tricks. The other one, the 307 objects. Yeah. Yeah, and that's true up to a point. If I'm over here, file, open, the default behavior is it's looking for all formats. You could have picked up other formats. Where you'll get into issues on these other formats, Illustrator comes in, it may or may not be immediately compatible with. Oh, no, that's fine. I'm just saying is that normally if you bring in stuff that's in the Corel Draw format, you don't have to think so hard. But if you're bringing in an SVG, which we just did, you may or may not have to do other things to deal with the imports. The point. If you bring it in from an OBIS, so that's some of that's experience. Some of it is you get it in there and you start playing with it, and nothing works until you figure it out. So we've basically got stuff. So I knew by playing with it, I guess is the right answer. Um, Now, the things that we're going to do real quick next, just so you have a familiarity with what we're doing before I bring in image paint. This is the color brown. If I hide that piece, I can go to Objects and Hide. You notice I have these areas are still brown. If I wanted to have selected everything that's brown, we're going to use the Find and Replace command in just a second. So at this point, if I want to undo the hide object, I just hit this back key once. If I wanted to undo all of the stuff I've done, locking and unlocking, I can at this point. So learn where the undo key is because you'll end up using it just a lot. Okay, so there's the vectors. I need to ungroup that. Went too many. Now they're all highlighted, everything's fine. So let's go back out just a little bit. I wanted to find, so I'm gonna go find this item right here. You can see that it's interior to the flowers. It's not connected to the other stuff, but it's that color brown that I'm looking for. So now, if I want all of the brown objects in here, I have the Find and Replace Docker. I go down here and it picks up all the information it needs for the search from this one find from selection. So now it's loaded. It knows that it's got the colors, the outlines, other things associated with it. And then I can hit Find All. When I do that, you'll notice now I've picked up the outside background piece, which will be the rosewood, and the inner pieces at the same time. Now that you have that selected and you can see it, I'm going to go ahead and load up the inlay panel and do the veneers so you can see the interplay. But I wanted to just do the Corel Draw portions initially here. Is there anything? Hmm, okay, well, let me get back here. If you click, something is selected, if you just click outside or hit the escape key, it stops being selected. Because I knew there were some inner pieces, maybe they're the right color, maybe they're not, I just selected one piece and then under the Find and Replace, I just used the From selection and it decides how many attributes it needs to form that query. Come on. Sorry, my computer is behaving poorly here. All right. Find all. Now, like I said, the only reason I clicked over here on the shape tool is it's a quick way for me to see that I've selected everything because all you get is an indicator of these sizing buttons showing that it's selected, but you don't necessarily know what is. So the reason I did the shape tool over here was just to be able to Okay, I got them all. We're good. If you look at the rows, yeah, we're going to be using it for this particular exercise. Now, one of the things that I was just commenting, because this is Corel Draw first, Inlay, and Image Paint second, I just wanted to be aware, if you have a drawing such as this that's been vectorized, what was the difference between the two vector files is there was a problem with the registration of one of the veneer pieces in the background. But the real trick is that one of the tools you need to have, the view on your menu bar allows you to pick wireframe. Everything, no matter how wide the lines are or what color fill they are, goes to a hairline mode, and you can do it. When you get somebody else's image, such as this one, spend a few minutes looking at it inside the wireframe or inside the Corel Draw, because you'll find things are screwed up. For example, you might find somebody over here. What you may not realize is that I took that piece away and it's still here in the wire view. Does anyone want to guess why? Nope, simpler than that. It turns out when I view the back color here, that duplicate is the background relative to the stem not being occupied. And so what I did here was just validate that what you see in the wireframe has things that appear to be duplicates, lines that are on top of each other. They may have things that shouldn't be there at all. You just need to spend a few minutes. Well, remember, this one's the one I use all the time. I moved it over there. I don't know why. I wanted to look at it. Now, if I want to move it back and I don't get to do an undo, it gets really slow because you have to zoom in, find the nodes, align them up, and touch the pieces. So many right now is I routinely bump stuff, get about a half hour later and go, oh, that's in the wrong spot. So word of caution, spend a few minutes with anything you load, looking at it in the wireframe and making decisions as to whether or not it's ready or safe for even attempting to do the image paint. For example, somebody said to duplicate. In Corel Draw, you can duplicate something as simply as touching the plus sign on your numeric keyboard or Control C, Control V. I just duplicated that object. Can anybody see that? Not from the wire view. You can't tell that I've got two of them. So the point being is, if I have a drawing or a picture that came in, it may well have duplicate pieces. It may have other issues, but the Corel Draw, the way it's designed to work is to make the picture look great. And the picture can look great with things sitting on top of other things that would never be cut out in veneer. So the real trick is if you hide a piece in here and look at it in a normal view, you better be seeing the background, or that piece isn't necessarily set up. In the X-ray view or not, you can see sometimes double lines and things like that. So this one's pretty good. One of the reasons I'm working here now is I wanted you also see my default page size was 24 by 18, but the object I'm working on looks like about 9 inches by 11 inches here. I've selected everything. And then it's just a question of, gee, how big is it? Well, this one tells me it's centered at this location on my page. It's basically 9 by 11. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my page match my drawing with a little bit of extra. So this is 9. And I'm hand typing there, and I'm using the tab key to switch to the next field over by 11. And that worked. So right now you can see the picture is about the same as the page size with a little bit of a boundary. That's good enough. You want to make sure that if you don't do that, when I go to put the veneer on the page, it'll put it way the heck over here where you can't see what you're doing. So it's better to match the size of the picture page to the piece that you're working with. All right, we're good here. So now I got my objects. If I want that Docker to get small, I just click on the double arrows. If I wanted to select a piece like this one, I can do properties. That one of interest, this is the color, the line width. This one is of use. It says, okay, there are 91 nodes in there. The curve length is 6 inches. So just in that one piece of rose, I have a circumference that's 6 inches long. That's a lot of cutting if you think about it, especially when you realize that everywhere there's this piece, there's a duplicated edge for the next piece over. Again, properties, and you've already seen the final release. So now, one last command and we'll load up Image Paint. This is the zoom tool. If I have my mouse hooked up right, I can zoom by rolling the mouse key. Or if I've got things bollixed, I can just go double click on that one and it'll center it to fit the page and I can see everything correctly. So that's just so you are aware of your environment here. The zoom key is kind of nuisance. A lot of these, once you've selected them, you have to go formally pick the one you want before you get into the next step. All right, so we're ready to do Image Paint. We got two activities there that need to be done. First one is we got the file loaded, got it checked out. We see that we can find and replace things reasonably. Now we want to do this portion of the exercise. So if everything's well and you've done your windows and you've loaded your Image Paint correctly, on the same window menu that we found the workspace, the Dockers, is your Image Paint. I'm going to bring up Image Paint now by selecting this one. Image Paint is an add-on to Corel Draw, and in the context of Corel Draw, that's where it works. It's not usable as an independent. It's not usable with different software packages per se. So we don't have a Lightburn version of Image Paint. Now this time you'll notice the first thing it does is, oh, we're enumerating the network resources, loading materials. I have my own library of materials that I use for my projects. I'm going to be loading in a new and separate library, just the same way you would if you're first setting up, the materials needed for this particular project. So first things first, Image Paint's now loaded. I'm going to go to the inlay panel and bring it up. One of the things that you would like to do, I don't know how many of you guys have more than one monitor, but it's possible to take any of these panels and drag and drop them out of this drawing area to a separate monitor. So when I'm working, I may well have taken the inlay panel and the objects panel and put them on my other monitor so I don't have to pop one up to get to the other and back. I can keep them both visible and active. And now, inlay's got two panels. The designer one is where you live. The manager is where you start picking up and dealing with machines, wood types. So for example, I have loaded in here all of my veneers. The way it works is if there's a group of veneers, you may have different pictures. The program automatically brings up pictures of these veneers. These are my background veneers. You can see a little bit of the background that I photographed at the same time I was creating this picture. So these are actually two different sheets of veneer just touching each other. But the main thing I'm saying is in my library, I have different veneers than are in the actual object. I also have a helix laser down here. I can edit and change the parameters for that by adding machines, selecting and editing and saving an export function there to Lightburn. This particular machine doesn't do Lightburn, but a lot of these other ones like the Auteur is a Lightburn compatible machine. You have things that you can do and edit on that one. The colors associated with these categories will change from one machine to the next. So there's a color palette. In my case, the Epilogue, if you look at the palette, has the ability to change the cut speed and a bunch of other things just on the basis of what color is the outline. So red or black, and I can go in and change under a color mapping scheme. I don't believe that's the case, but I do know that the ones that are set up for Lightburn have a separate color library, and I believe, correct me on this one, Travis, I'm not, the last two colors are reserved for comments, and then you can specify all of the vector or other information you need for that color to be consistent with what you are doing in Lightburn. So again, those are the machines. I tend to stick with the one I know, so I just use that one. In this manager mode, I have 42 veneers loaded. The presumption is they're all the same thickness. The other thing that I have that shows up here is the actual picture of the veneer has the physical size of that veneer. This one's 16 by 17. This one is 3 by 8. A 3 by 8 with something that's 9 inches by 11 inches isn't going to fly. So you need to be conscious of that. While we're here, I wanted to also show the default information. Under this gear key at the bottom is access to where the files will go, where the sample designs reside. You can reattach the material database to an object. If say you do two different designs and you have two different libraries, and you have to go bring one of them back, you can rebind it there. This is the one that's of use here. I have, under material display options, display the series name. So if you look over here, now I have no idea what they are. Okay, so those defaults I recommend is to at least have the display names. The virtual material showing Vincent has provided a library of veneers. You don't own that veneer, but you have the image of it. So you can actually design with different veneers that are in that virtual library materials. And I'll show you what they look like in just a second here. They will be all red in this category. So I'm over here in the material manager. You see this slide bar here? The material that's in here just goes on and on and on and on. But all of these on and on pictures are red. These are all the virtual materials. So in any given library, you have choices that may belong to you and that you can design with, and ones that you don't. So maybe you say, oh, I really like that effect. What can I do? And the answer is you can use the virtual materials, you just can't cut them. It won't let you. But what I am going to do down here, just so you can see what happens, that's a lot of different things to choose from. I'm going to go ahead and check this box to not show me virtual materials. I'll get confused otherwise. So now all of those extra shells and pictures and stuff are no longer populated, and all you're looking at are my choices of veneer and wood. So you can do it. For example, I could change his background to mine and get a totally different picture of wood. What you need to be aware of, and I'll show you in just a second here. So this is the manager mode. I just selected a veneer for this portion of the picture that's here and here. And that worked. These are not good choices for this picture, but it worked. Now I'm going to go back to the designer mode. We were just doing the manager, which allows you to design your machine, load up, and work with wood. Let's say I've got a picture here. I want to move it to a different category. I can go stick it down in a different location. I would do that, for example, if the material is different, like a shell, or it's a thicker veneer. You don't want to mix different thicknesses of veneer in a library. So there's moving stuff around that can be done. Again, the context for that is with a right click. What I'm going to do now, rather than drag this out too much longer, is go ahead and actually do the design. Now, in the default behavior for any library that exists, it comes up with the materials loaded under these different tabs, including the virtual materials. So you have the ability to use palette. When I select a material for the design, it goes over here. The background I chose and this dark wood veneer, both are now available under the Use tab. So once you get going on your design, you've got these items loaded, you can just use the Use tab for the rest of the activity. Now in this case, I've done something that we don't want. I've selected that piece. We're down in the designer. I can change the laser type, some of the wood categories. This is where the machine information for the kerf and the pocket shows up, the speeds for cutting and the frequency on the Epilog laser show there. If I wanted to switch my tool over to the auteur, you get some other stuff I'm not trained to show you, but Vincent can. The auteur has its own settings. It also has an interface that allows you to work with your laser diode and set up specifics for that machine and then have it witnessed by the machine. Epilog does all of its stuff from a separate printer definition. When I select the Epilog, it's attached to my computer as a printer. So it's got its own set of menus, its own set of, like I said, remember the word color mapping? I can go in there and specify any speed, any cut rates, any raster or air assist as part of that interface for that printer. So things change in the environment. I'm going to cancel out of here because we don't need to do that. But I'm going to get back to populating this with the right stuff. So first thing I'm going to do is, I have wood in here that doesn't belong. To get rid of it, I'm going to go down here, and this is the remove material from paths. That went away, and this one went away. So no longer do I have any of my materials being used in Vincent's picture, but we do have the small problem of how do we get to the images and the library and the pictures that were provided for this drawing. And that is through the library database manager down here, this icon. When I open that up, remember we were using this for the material displays and some of the other sample designs. So you can bring up stuff there. If you do this, the vector files are provided as part of the sample. But what we really need to do is go to this, and we need to create a new material database specific for this picture from the images that we have of that picture. So the first things we have to do is your choices by icon here all pop up as you over them. Refresh, save. This one is the one we're going to be doing. We are going to create a new material database for the rose picture by doing that right here. Now it has choices for what are you doing? Well, this is my library. I don't want that. I have a backup version of that library on my D drive. What I am going to do is select ImagePaint Default, which has the structures that I need for any library before the veneer gets put in. So I'm going to select that icon to create a new library. I'm going to go give it a name down here called Rose. I'm going to call it Rose 5. Oops, I like my typing. So I got a database name. I've selected the ImagePaint default and I'm going to create it. And you'll see the default path is Roger Desk ImagePaint default. So I'm going to hit create. Oh, it says already exists. I didn't know that. We're going to change it to Rose then. Let's see if that exists. I thought I got rid of it. All right. I don't need to say that. So it's off. The green bar on the top is it's doing its activity. This particular database manager down here, you see the name now appears here in red. It has not been saved. It's green when it's saved. And the material manager selections are currently blocked from that icon because we have this one up here. So we now have a Rose library, material library. And if you look carefully, you'll see that it's highlighted in blue. That is your active database. If I select materials, that'll turn blue, Rose goes to yellow, but this is the one I want to use for that drawing. I'm going to do the next step. This is still creating for me. I don't need that, but what I do need to go is load the material database. So how many veneers do you think you'll find in my loaded material database? Only stuff I got in there is virtual. It's asking me, do you want to change this? Okay, so Rose is here. I have selected it and loaded it. If you'll notice over here on this screen, Rose has got not a zip. It defaulted to a machine I don't recognize, but it did create a library, it just doesn't have anything in it, which is kind of what you'd expect. I'm going to close that for just a second. Again, we're in the categorizer. I can change and edit my machines and a few other things, but the real value is I need to be able to add wood to my database. And I'm going to go right back down here. Rose is now saved. I'm going to open the database manager. I'm going to make sure I'm selected on Rose. And now the fun part. I can add an entire folder's worth of veneer, or I can add the material by selecting the files. I tend to prefer this choice just because it's a little more intimate in terms of I want that one, that one, that one, that one. If I've got all of the files in one directory, it'll go do a great job of loading everything. I just can't see where they're at. So this is the one I prefer. Now I'm going to go ahead and add materials, but I need to get there from here. So on your PC, one of the things you probably don't necessarily know unless you look for it first is where are those pictures? Well, in this case, they were in the download directory under the Roses 5 file. So I'm going to go open that directory. Now, let's take a look at what we have here. We've got a preview panel set up. We're in the detailed view in Windows. When I select the burl, I get a nice pretty picture. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go ahead and hit the Shift key and then the Indian rosewood. And look what's happened down here. Yes? Okay, let's see if we can do that. Hang on a second. Let me, we're still in the open video. I'm going to get rid of this. So nothing's selected. In the detail view, I believe right here, if I do a right click, I can specify the menu of items that I want. They're already selected here. So the trick is they're probably not visible at this point because of the preview pane. But having gone in, you do a right click there, you say more, and then I've memorized if you type the first letter of that horizontal, what it does is it brings up all of the H's The last one of which is that horizontal one that's on the top of my choices. If I type in the letter V, it's the first one of the V choices down here. So I almost always do vertical first, then horizontal second. And now I have a feel for the size of the file types. I have a preview. We're going to load them in, and we're going to check sizes before we get too fancy here. So this one is a select all, and it does by file name, each one of which is the wood type, a -3, meaning it's not duplicating something. If I had done a -3 and I tried to load it a second time, it will complain and say, are you sure you want to do that? Because it already exists. But let me go ahead and hit open. So we've got them selected. We've got them roughly the right size. Even if they're not the right size, you can still load them. And here is the adding materials screen. And it has explicit information about it should be the wood type, a -1. If you don't know the wood type, and you're creative like I wasn't, I have A1 through 10 and B1 through 12. Those are my material types. I have no idea what veneer they are. On the average, they came in a box. They were never labeled for me. So you can choose your own name, but it's a whole lot easier on you later if you respect the material you're working with by choosing a name that's real. The other options down in here is don't rename them, ignore these digital. They come into effect if I try to load the same image twice, it'll come back and say, well, it already exists. What are you doing? Do you want me to rename it? Renumber if they're not correct, so forth and so on. There may be other information that's applied, but right now, the second I apply, two things are going to happen. First one of which is I can close this out because guess what? I actually now have in tab 1 veneers. It happened to have selected one, but the nice thing about it is if I hover over them, I just got a picture of the burl with a size of 11 by 16 roughly, so we can check that in a second. I have the flower here. Let me go ahead and zero in a little bit. I have the stuff for the flowers here. I have the stuff for the background, and we're ready to go because we've chosen our laser. No, I did that right here. If this is the wrong thickness, you can go in and fix that by editing it. You'll notice that I have the veneers appearing in different categories and locations. For whatever reason, when Vincent brought them in his environment, wood 2 was probably soft, and miscellaneous pattern in my case was probably medium hard, and then something else. They come in with different settings specified for how to cut them. Those settings you get to set per wood group under these conditions here. But right now, I'm not going to worry about it because the important thing for the designer in me is that they're available, I can go. So let's do the same exercise we just did without the veneer. I've got brown. I got brown in the middle. I'll pick that one just because it's easier. I'm going to go over here to find from selection, and we're doing the entire background when we go to do the next step. So of course, the first thing Roger's going to do is grab the wrong veneer and see how it looks. And the answer is that's probably not a good choice for a background. Does that seem like a reasonable statement? So not a good choice. However, we can choose a different veneer. That's a little busier too. I think you're getting to the point, which is that, gee, maybe I ought to stick with wood, the rosewood that he's offering. And in fact, that does look pretty good. Now, let's do the same exercise, but with a subtle difference here. I want you to see what happens to you. The cutter panel here is now, because I set the page size correctly, adjacent to that. I can see both these things. If I'm working in here on a regular basis, I have the option on the top of this menu bar to auto zoom when I switch from one page to the next. I like that, so I leave that default on. And I'll show you why in just a second. But we're good. This is ready to go. There's nothing wrong with it. If I wanted to be fancy, well, hell, I'll center it over that softer wood core so that I've got a little bit of structure going through the middle of the flowers. Vincent did it over to the side here for some reason. But, one difference between Roger and Vincent is Vincent's got a much better eye of how to paint things than Roger does. Roger just lumps them all in there so they're efficiently cut, but they're not necessarily pretty. I'll show you a Rogerism in just a minute, but I wanted you to see this. This panel, assuming I have no further edits, I'm going to go to wireframe just so you can see it. That looks good. This one you can still see the appearance of the veneer. You can see the background is one piece and I've got all the interstitials filled in correctly. What I wanted to show you briefly is over here in the object menu. When I'm working on the veneer, I'm over in this location on the objects on layer 1. When I'm working with the cutter, that resides up in the, I don't know how to describe it, on the same page but above where you are working on the pieces is where Vincent puts all of the information. So you can see this curve and this curve and this curve are all resident in this area on top of that bitmap. I can turn the bitmap off and you can vaguely see what's going on there. Let me turn the view back to normal. So you can see where things reside. If you do this correctly, you should also be thinking about what can I get away with? The answer is if you get all this far and then you say, oh shoot, this piece, which you'll notice the little blue outline here, everything is selected in that path. Well, I want to change that leaf down here. Oops. One of the cardinal rules that you need to follow is once you've set a piece in this panel, before you can edit it or touch it or work with it, you must remove the veneer from the equation. That means basically going back to your inlay. If you make a change on something over here and it's still attached to the veneer, this picture doesn't change. It's not connected that way. So you have to go remember to select what you're going to get rid of. I'm going to remove that portion of the design and I'm going to remove it from the veneer. And notice it's stepping through quietly and doing these pieces one at a time. If it doesn't, oh, I know, I had selected one piece. I didn't realize I hadn't selected all of them. Okay, so now I'm going to go disconnect the rest of them. All right, nothing is connected. When I click on a piece, there are no objects above layer 1 that I'm dealing with. So before we go to image paint, I wanted you to see what will happen to you if you don't. So, hey, we're going to give the background rose. That's cool. And then, oh, Roger likes that. So Roger's going to go over here in the cut panel and say, I really like that rose, but I'm going to turn it 90 degrees. Mostly 90 degrees. Each time I if I select that object, if I click on it again, it reverts back to you get to move the position. Okay? Just so you're aware that I have now changed what appears to be the center. And that's good. The Image Paint program allows you to do all or nothing, but I can go in now and tell it, hey, I want that piece to be rosewood. I want this piece to be rosewood. Image Paint does a good job of placing them on the cut panel individually, so each one can be rotated or changed. And that's one of the things you have to be consciously thinking about. I've already screwed this picture up. I've got veneer going this direction. I've got veneer going that direction. I could just screw up the rest of it if we really want to. Oh, here's one. That veneer piece is right off the edge of the page, so I actually have to move it over here somewhere to actually get it to load properly. So none of that's going to fly for this picture, but I wanted you to be aware that you can, in fact, do anything you want. If you're working something like a rose, you may want to do each one of these pieces individually. Are you going to do that or not? Got it. So I'm going to remove this one. I got to go remove that one. And we're done. So let's go do the rose just as an example. So I am happily loading this stuff. I'm not making any cut panels, but if you want, I can do that now, or I can show the rose. Here's a material. Find and replace. From selection. I'm going to find all of them. Now we got a small problem. Both roses are selected, as is a portion of the leaf down here. Now, before on the background, I selected all those pieces that I went over to the inlay panel and auditioned different veneers. I'm going to go ahead and pick the target veneer, but I want you to see something important. If you just blast stuff over, you get what you pay for. The finished picture of the rose is boring as heck. There is no color variation. There's really everything I've done wrong. So give it a second to load up. So maybe, just maybe, that wasn't such a good idea. Yeah. Almost. Yeah. So, well, you can see that he's changed the size on any given image in both Illustrator and Corel Draw. The picture doesn't have to have any lines. It looks like crap, but each area that is defined does have an outline, which is captured here. So the main problem you're getting into now is notice that this one, all the structure in the leaves and the rows, what you're missing and may not understand is that how many duplicate lines do I have here? Each piece that butts up to another piece duplicates this edge. Image Paint not only will duplicate it, but it'll overlap it when you go to cut it. You have to separate these pieces from each other on the veneer for them to cut correctly. So just shotgunning in like I did, one, doesn't give you a good picture, and two, sets you up to destroy every piece that you go to cut. So I'm going to do a slightly different technique here just so you can see why. First pass is, I just don't like, sorry, that's the other thing. Corel Draw is not your friend. If I were to click here and try and corral all of these objects, I'll end up moving the veneer, but I won't be able to select those pieces. Because I can drag the veneer anywhere I want, and it changes the picture over here eventually. You see that? That's really not what I wanted. Trust me. All right. So we're going to go back over here, realign it this way. There's no undoing because we're using Vincent's program here. That veneer change did a whole bunch of steps that you don't get to undo. So be careful. Changes over here don't reflect in the original picture and may or may not screw things up. The one thing it does, well, the answer is yeah. Unfortunately, the correct answer to that is I'm going to do selection, but I'm going to do, this is your friend. That is the answer to your question. Let me show you. You you got to redo and you got to redo it intelligently. So I'm going to do this a slightly different way. I got to do a freehand pick. Remember when I went to grab this, I moved the veneer and it affected everything. You got to start your grab out in the white area and then work it inside the veneer. So now all of the outlines for this rose are selected and this leaf, and I can go in with the image paint using the pick tool and tell it, that, don't want that. And it's removing all of those correctly. And then this rose remains. So if I did everything like I did here, the way I get this kind of detail and coloration is I need to physically paint with the pieces. And not only do they need to be physically moved, they better not be touching anywhere. There needs to be a gap. This piece would cut poorly because it's overlapping the other one. There has to be a gap between the pieces for it to cut at all. So let's, oh, okay, yeah. Well, first pass is what's missing. Oh, okay. So the answer is everywhere. This is a duplicate line. Every piece in here is traced by the others around it until otherwise moved. So remember how I got here. What did I do? I selected absolutely everything and said, go for it. And the answer is you bring it over as a brick, it behaves like a brick. It won't cut correctly, it won't behave. So what the default be, yeah, yeah, and I'll show you where that works. That feature, bear with me here. I'm selecting that picture again. I'm not in the tool I thought I was. Apparently, there we go. Every now and then I say, I've done this selection, I'm going to go on and do the activity, only to find out that Corel Draw is still thinking about it. So this one, I don't have any outlines, but I'm going to turn them back on to, and you can set any outline width you want, 4 points. I mean, these are big outlines. That's cool. Doesn't matter. What gets over here is what's going to get cut with the hairline. So this is the hairline outline. We've got pieces here. What Vincent's program does correctly that I didn't do is, remember, I got all these things in here and I'm positioning them around. The correct way to do it if you're actually going to paint with veneer is to not do every piece in one fell swoop. You select this one, you hit the veneer. You select this one, you hit the veneer. Now what Image Paint is doing is placing them here with adequate spacing so that these pieces will be cut on the laser independent of each other, and each piece can be now positioned to pick up the effect in the rows that you want. So depending on how lazy you are, I may pick 20 of these pieces, or I may pick one and then move them over on the picture. This is the one I wanted to show you a little bit more about. So it's putting them in separate locations, whether I move them here or not, and it goes and finds an empty spot on the veneer to the best of its ability with spacing that would allow you to cut immediately if you wanted. This is a long, skinny piece. Long, skinny pieces have one major problem. Anyone want to guess? That's right. Had I chosen in my infinite wisdom to put this piece on this veneer, and this veneer has an easily damaged grain, that piece will be broken before I can even get it into the picture when I'm doing the marquetry. So the things that you need to watch for on pieces, this piece, although it is, I'm not sure which one I selected. Hang on a second here. Yeah, so I didn't pick the stem like I thought. The stem is broken into several pieces here. So in principle, the skinny portions of something can be aligned with the grain. And the answer is if you don't do that alignment on the long skinny ones, you won't get it in the picture. Something like this, which has got a nice rounded contour, grain size is not important. You can let it go in and it'll behave itself. Everything is good that way. Let me go back to selecting and printing. So what I'm trying to say here is that once I've got all of these pieces over here on the picture and I'm getting the colors I want, I'll just do the selection process here. Your patience is paid for when you're doing this because you can place them in areas on the veneer that really pop. So if you're going to be painting with a veneer, the answer is you want to do one piece at a time. You want to see how it behaves. You can do 3 or 4 pieces in an area. So for example, if I select this one and then I hold the shift key and I select that one and then I shift key one more time, I've got 3 pieces selected. You can see that here. I can place all 3. They'll go together over on the veneer, but now it's really easy to say, well, these guys are together, but they need to have more character. Maybe this piece, and this one right now, maybe if I wanted the grain to be pointing into the center of the rose, maybe I want to rotate this a little bit. If I'm happy with the contrast here, this one doesn't have enough contrast. So maybe what I want to do is this piece ought to be in a lighter area so that this piece, I'm going to correct the orientation, can be put in a darker area and give the effect of a shadow on the rose leaf in that region here. So again, the piece that you're working on in this panel is highlighted over here. When we go to a cutter panel, it'll be there. But now I've done some coloration here that makes this kind of look like the edge of a rose petal. Again, the leaves, we can do a couple more pieces here, but I think you get the impression. If you're doing something that you want to paint with, like a leaf here, you really don't want to select all of them and dump them on the page. If you're doing a background, you got no choice. You really want to select them all and dump them on the background because that way you can get a continuation of the grain. So those are some of the things I've observed and learned the hard way. So let's do one of these leaves just for the fun of it. So the leaf is supposed to be. Oh, okay. No more comments about Vincent then. All right. So here's the. Okay. Well, you should have done this one too because you're faster than I am. I'm going to go ahead and do the ash burl. Now, I don't have the species names on here, so maybe we ought to do that while we're at it. All right. So it's this one he wanted to use there. So I got a nice piece. I'm kind of half on it, half off. The nice thing about leaves is the grain points which direction. Well, the answer is it needs to point from the center out. So that's a bad choice here on the orientation. It looks best about like this angle. That leaf matched. Remember I'm doing. By the way, once I've selected them here, I'll switch back over to using just the used portion. I hadn't done enough here. So this one, I've got. Do I have? If I zoom in, I kind of have a shading effect here, which is the grain for the wood is doing what the veins in the leaf would have done under the right conditions. You may find that you want this one on top to be a little bit lighter so that you get additional shading like you would in the outside. That's too much. And something like this is distracting here. So you may want to try and target grain a little bit differently to get more pronounced version of it. So I think you now have enough to paint by the material. I'm going to go back to doing the background and go do the cutter panel that I probably should have done earlier anyway. so you have a good stuff. So we're basically here. Anytime I've got veneer positioned on the picture, anytime I click on that, Image Paint immediately switches over to that choice of veneer and shows you where that object is highlighted. So you can easily find your way back and forth between the image, the main image, and the cutter image. So you can make and fix stuff like that. So I'm going to go back to doing, these aren't placed. I want to do the browns. So I'm going to do find and replace from selection. Now, here's a question that you guys think about. I have just found all of the brown. I'm now going to go put them on the rosewood for all the right reasons. All of those pieces are grouped in a way that I can bring them over. Now, are there any of these background pieces that might potentially be overlapping? The answer has to be no. He has done a good job on the background. So the only thing you need to worry about is, do I want that center band to be highlighted in the picture here or here? On my veneers, there's a risk of things being cracked around the edges, so you need to kind of know the material you're working with. Oh, that was one other thing. This one says it's 11.7 by 16.5. How do I know that's real? The program sizes it automatically. So if you look, when I clicked on the veneer picture, it immediately says it is 11 by 16. It's possible to get the veneer in with the wrong size, which is what we ran into initially. There was some stuff like that. So let's talk a little bit now about, let's say we had everything populated, we're cool. We just want to do a cutter panel. So do you want to do that? I'm going to do that right now. The right click on the veneer in the used tab, not this tab, but this tab. Left click on here, goes in and says, okay, open material location, so you can actually see physically where it is on the computer. You can also create the cutter profile paths. If this is not been compromised by changes over here, you're ready to go. You just select this once. The difference is that, oh, I didn't have it all selected. Oh well, something wasn't quite right. Or is it still going? It's still going. Maybe region. What is showing me now, let me zoom out, my bed size on my laser is 18 by 24. So it's placed the veneer along the upper left edge square. Looks like that didn't do correctly, so let's go back and try that again. Did I? Yeah, I have everything selected here. Let me go back, try it one more time. You can always tell it to do the cutter paths twice. And if you make changes, you might want to do that. Hey, Vincent, I don't know what's broken here. You know what? Let me do one other thing just to see. Oh, okay, yeah, no, I think the difference here is that these are actually not the same path. So there's a little subtle difference when I go to select them by color. They're really not, and I'll show you that why in just a second. The fix for this one is, don't worry about it. We'll fix it over here now. So remember, to do that, I need to select not the veneer, but the pieces, and tell it to undo. And I'll go fix that other problem here. This is me knowing what to do, maybe not explaining it very well. I got rid of the background. Now let's do the find again. Select a brown, find all. Go over here to the objects. You get all of the brown objects selected together. Now, do you see what's happened? I have multiple objects selected, but if I go look at this, they're not necessarily the same color of red and blue. It turns out they're independent of each other. So what I really needed to do to make that piece is to basically combine the pieces by welding them or combining them. Just use the combine. Now when I go look at the nodes, they're all the same color, and guess what will happen when I go to do the inlay cutter panel? Now they're all part of the same object. I can go, so that's selected, I'm going to make them brown. I'm sorry, rosewood, excuse me, not brown. Now I can do the cut panel, and I will get the correct, oh, no I didn't, come on. You better, you may have an issue here, Houston, I don't know. It's treating the interior pieces separately from the outside, and I gotta figure out why. Okay, let me try a different one. It could be. Let's see if we can do it. Remember, we've got this cutter panel here. It's not fully populated. I don't care. Let's go do a, come on, stop. Create a cutter path from what's currently placed. That one's a little better behaved. You can see them over here on the wood veneer as I was going to cut them. So the answer is you don't have to cut everything. It gets a little complicated if you don't. So when I actually do this, I work pretty hard to make sure everything is on this panel. Oh, by the way, if I move this one, I can move it all I want. I can make it a disaster when I go to cut. I can also, mhm. Yeah, okay, this one is being mirrored cut. Let me explain that one. As part of the machine setup, if I want the best fit for the picture with the least number of, least gap, I'm going to want to make a mirrored cut. So I'm cutting from the back side of the veneer and I go to place them on the picture. I've corrected for the kerf so that these are literally mirror, butting up against each other with no kerf at all. That's what the kerf collection does. If you zoom in on this, the difference is that this object with the extra points, we're literally going to cut on a pocket, the inside dimension, or we're going to cut on the outside dimension so that when the laser does the cut, the edge that actually comes up on the veneer piece follows the center line here. So what Vincent has done is basically corrected for the kerf by choosing the outline here that is just a smidge larger than the piece on the picture. So once it's cut, it actually fits that interior piece and will butt up to the next one with no kerf. The background piece, I'm not quite sure why that didn't cut right. It may be treating these. I suspect I have to change the direction on it, but I'll go figure that out later. But it didn't cover over the way it should. The other thing that you can see over the object is that anytime I've made a cut on this layer here, let me select it so it does that. See down here, I've got in the page 3, I have my burl name here. I've got the laser choice and the cut pass and an image of the veneer that is now mirrored, as are these paths. If I were to try to put that pass back over there, it would be backwards and mirrored. That mirroring works like a charm. If I select a piece here, one of the nice things that Vincent gave us is that I have now identified on the cut panel where that is in the picture. So if you're like me and you've got a piece of laser that's cut out, it's nice to know where that piece belongs in the picture because the smaller they are, oh, dang, that's weird. Those are pockets. So I can't do that. It's nice to be able to, what I'm saying is, say I got 100 of these pieces cut out in here. It's nice to be able to go look at the veneer, select the piece I'm looking at, and have it tell me where am I in the picture. If I click on this piece here, and I've done a cut panel for the appropriate wood, which I haven't, then it'll tell me over on the cut panel where that is. So let me go ahead and do the cutter paths for this one real quick. And I mean, it's absolutely amazing how fast that step is. So this is the cut piece on the rose. I go back over to here. I can see it highlighted on the rose. I think, maybe not. Let's go back to this one. Yeah, there you go. It's highlighted on the rose so I can see where it is. I can also check now. This is the unmirrored version of this, so I can actually see where it is on the veneer piece if it were available to me. So it basically allows you to switch back and forth between where is this piece. There's that piece. If I go to the appropriate cut panel, it's not highlighted. Yeah, maybe it's highlighted. You couldn't see it if it was. But it allows me to come back and forth between the different views. If you've got a really complicated puzzle, that feature alone pays for the cost in terms of time saving. Otherwise, you would be looking for, well, I need this size piece. I got to make a copy of it. And then I got to go over here and paste it and see if I can find, oh, it's that piece here. So it's got to be, nope, it's this one down here. Having it just highlight and go to that location is worth its weight in gold. So I am using, that's up here hidden in this bar. I am using version 3.5. There may be things, erratas and things that need to be fixed that will result in a new version. This one here, I don't have auto update enabled, but I could. I can also check for an update. So, so things due to the license needs to be here. Things associated with the cutting appears here. So, for example, on this cut panel, I have blue chosen as the color. It shows up in here. I can see information about it. If I had chosen not the epilogue, but I was going to cut it with the laser diode, I may find, in fact, I have a different color associated with it. But more importantly, the second I have this association to the Altura Master, I can click on the Lightburn connection and transfer that picture into Lightburn for cutting. I don't have Lightburn installed on my computer. I didn't get around to it. I also have a piece here that doesn't really belong. Let me get rid of that. So these pieces, you put the veneer in the machine on the bed size here, and it will proceed to cut them in no particular order, but they're all oversized appropriately for the fact that they're going to go in the interior. So that's the sizing has already been done when you go to look at this. And in this case, the line width is small enough that it will cut on the epilogue laser and certainly will cut appropriately on all the other lasers, either by color or by power and speed. But the main thing right now is that anytime I want, I can say, okay, I've made some changes on the placement and whatever. I'll just tell it, give me a new cut path. And it'll do it. So now when I go to this cut path, oh, that one is, oh, it's doing funny things here. This was the cutter path here. Oh, what you were seeing was it actually prepping the cut path. It flashed by. What I do have, if I look at the object, I have that cut path done here, all the items on it. If I shrink that down, what you'll find is that if I have done more than one cut path, like I did on this one, hidden are the previous cut paths. So occasionally you can learn from one of these other paths what you've done that's different. It just keeps a background here. These don't cut, these are not visible. But if for some reason you needed to reference this one against that one, they're available and you can make them visible. This is one where you must definitely use the wireframe to be able to see the differences. But I think we covered pretty much more than we needed to, but I wanted to make sure that we're at least got to the cutter panels and stopped for a second here you guys to ask some questions. Yeah. Oh yeah. No, we're covering two major programs in one session. That's a little bit of a luxury. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and we've got some. I recorded this session. If I hadn't mentioned that, I apologize. We'll be able to edit it down a little bit and save some of the good sections out. I still have to go figure out what we didn't fix on the background because that was working just fine yesterday. So I don't know what I did. But I think the main thing right now is that you can shop so quickly in the inlay panel between veneers and areas. And it's just wonderful to be able to say, I want to try that in a totally different veneer. How does it look? And the answer, not so good. So in just 1 second, I can go in and kick in as many different choices of materials until I kind of hone in on what I want, or as in Vincent's case here, we have enough information based on his examples to do the leaves for the upper portion and paint the lower leaves from a slightly darker veneer with some extra detail and do the flowers. And you certainly could change the flower color instantaneously. What you may not want to do is pick a flat veneer where there's no structure at all. Um, so if you picked, yeah, right. It is wonderfully so. it also means that if you're doing that, your pieces can be a lot larger. Because if I wanted to trace this with an auto trace, it would do a piece for every bit of the shading. And the answer is why? I'll do one large piece, place it in the appropriate region, rotate it, and now I can paint it so it's darker on that side and position it so that I got just a touch of that. Oops, sorry, just a touch more. There we go, or less. I wanted to catch a little bit of the dark on that one edge. So now I've got some shading built in for a whole chunk. And if I really wanted to be fussy about it, I could do what we started with, which is select and then immediately go over to the inlay panel and put it all on burl. And now I've got the entire roses being done on a very busy material. And yeah, okay, cool. It's doing a pretty good job. You notice how it's actually spacing these out correctly? So we did something slightly different here that now the pieces are being selected and actually physically positioned for me. So I get a lot of character here. Let me select those. I'm not sure what I did, but somehow I persuaded it, or the program persuaded itself that because I had some of these pieces already a different veneer, I better go place these one at a time to get them right. So now I've got lots of, yeah, I've got a lot of color and variation here with nothing more intelligent than switching out the piece of veneer. Now, I may not have the right shading for a rose. In other words, I might act correctly. Yeah, and the answer is before I had anything placed, and part of that difference, I think, if I go ahead and do the thanks but no, I'm going to uninstall all of this. All of the pieces on both roses will go back to having no assigned veneer. And this time when I select that color and tell it find from selection all, inlay panel, oops, sorry, wrong window, pick my base material. Now it's going to move them as a block right onto the other piece, but not space them out. So I think the difference was is that, yeah, I think, okay, yeah, okay. So what you're saying here is that, yeah, so if I actually go in here and rotate one piece and then tell it, okay, fine, I don't like that. We're going to do, we're going to select, and the nice thing about this one is it selects by the color in the object, not by the veneer. So when I do my find in place, it finds the same group based on the original fill color. So what Vincent is doing is now I just learned something new too. I found all, and now I'm going to go place them on, God forbid, I'm not sure if it's smart enough to know that I did it on the same veneer or a different one. So hang on a second here. Well, that one kind of took it over anyway without one at a time. Well, that's what I don't know. I had about 10 pieces selected on this rose and had moved only one. So something triggered differently. I backdoored into something here. Well, it may not be done yet too. I don't know. Yeah. Well, yeah, Vincent. The difference here is where I did a block selection on this particular item. I switched to it. I had multiple pieces on the right veneer, and it proceeded to put these guys in on the new veneer in properly spaced locations. And so it did one of the steps for me free of charge. I probably don't deserve that now that I think about it. But, you know, mhm. Okay, so now if I change to a, well, let's actually do it. Let's, I think the difference may be if I select something like this and select a new veneer, it may have done that. I don't know. Yeah, no, it's moving around as a chunk. Hmm. Okay. Yeah, you'd have to. Oh, I'll play back the video. Yeah, yeah. I did that before, and then I reselected, and it proceeded to do a large chunk of these things with the correct locations, but the rest of them it defaulted properly to the right. It spread them out like I had selected each one of them by hand. So it's half of one or six of the other. Yeah, here we go. So some combination of selecting, removing, and reattaching. It used the same location for the pieces that were previously assigned, but then it went in methodically here and spaced all the other ones that were not properly uh, separated. And it's done a really wonderful job of spacing them out so that I can drop them right over here, literally, and get the appearance that you have on your rows um, fairly comfortable. Yeah, I got a lot of variety here that I didn't have before because all of the pieces were here. So, yeah, I think you saw it. I don't know why or what I did, but I'll take it. I have my own way of doing that separately that I do on a regular basis, but that's not part of this. So, anyway, I think the point I wanted to wrap up with is that you got to be in a position to do a couple of things. One, I started from loading the file here. Anybody notice how often I saved the design? You're asking for it. I always save and back up. Once I've got the vectors the way I want them, I will save off a duplicate of that file with the understanding that every now and then I do stupid things that I can't recover from. So I will manually save at major junctions. About the time I go to do a cutter panel, I will have forced a couple of saves that I can recover from. And it's not because of image paint, it's typically because my friend Corel Draw has decided to crash in the middle of something. So the other thing I have that we probably can get away with here is if all else fails, you've done all of this wonderful work, you got everything done, and you go, oops, I don't want to do it. Here on the file menu is the ability to revert to the last saved when you started your session. If I had done a save at the very beginning, that would be possible. I have no idea what will happen to us, but I'm going to go ahead and end this session by reverting to nothing, I think. Yeah. No, actually, I got lucky. I got it all the way back to where we had the original picture loaded. What I don't know and can't tell you is, gee, did we go back to having all of the objects? Yeah. So we're right back to day one. We didn't do anything this last hour and a half or two. My apologies. So you were asking, how do I know that thing? First thing is I'm going to do an ungroup just because it really is easier to work with. If you're in a group, you have to use the control key to get to a specific item on the page. It's bloody painful. Um, but you can do it. I'll show you here in a real quick minute. A lot of that comes under the category of there are things you got to learn in Corel Draw so that you won't pay the price later. So that's why I started out just working Corel Draw. And maybe I ought to show you that one price being paid here. Did it ungroup or not? You can see how my mouse is doing a pause and a flash. I don't know if that'll show or not, but ungrouping. Oh, I know why. I can't ungroup because they're locked. I got to first lock and then unlock. Excuse me. I was wondering why Corel was saying no. Come on. Are you going to come back? Yeah, we're about to crash, folk. That is Corel Draw doing what it's going to do, and I can't stop it. But anyway, the reason I deleted those, if you go select some of these line items from the objects and go try and query what are they and where are they, you get different behaviors. Yeah. So this is the SVG something or other right in the middle of the picture with absolutely nothing that you can see or do. So that was, you were asking how it is I knew to delete it. There's nothing behind it. If I do these guys, I've got the same basic problem. What do I have? Where are they? Can I see them? Even if I set fills and colors, there's nothing there to work with. That's data of some sort that's part of the conversion. So that one gets deleted also. And right now we're at that point where I need to stop because my Corel Draw is going to crash anyway. Um, I'm sorry if that's too much for one session. But, well, I tried to cover enough spectrum. You can go in and get in trouble. Like I said, the other thing that's probably I did with Thane yesterday was you don't have to use pictures of veneer. You can go take a picture of Michael Jackson or somebody else and paint with that picture. There's no law saying that this couldn't be pictures of fabric or any other material if that fits your needs. The main thing right now is that because of that, the way it works, you're going to get a good fidelity to that picture with the vector pieces that you're cutting. So if you were a fabric person and wanted to, it's called fussy cutting, where you cut a little picture out of the larger piece of fabric. You can use the same approach here to cut out different regions